The massive space station floated silently in the dark between stars, its crystalline walls glowing with soft blue light. Inside the main chamber, 12 different alien species worked together as they had for thousands of years. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and their job was simple: find new worlds and decide what to do with them. Counselor Vexstar stood before the giant scanning screen, his 6 arms moving across the control panels. His species had been exploring space for over 50,000 years, and he had seen hundreds of new worlds. Most were empty rocks. Some had simple animals. A few had intelligent life that needed watching. Today felt like any other day. "Sir, we found something," called out Technician Zoel from across the room. Her voice echoed in the vast chamber. "New energy readings from Sector 7G. Vexstar moved to the main display screen. A small dot appeared, growing larger as the computers focused on it. Soon, a beautiful blue and green planet filled the screen, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. "Third planet from a yellow star," Zoel reported, reading from her instruments. "It has water, oxygen, and signs of intelligent life." Vexstar nodded. This happened several times each year. They would find a new world with smart creatures living on it. The council had a simple system for rating these discoveries. Category 1 meant dangerous, stay away. Category 2 meant interesting but not ready for contact. Category 3 meant harmless and developing slowly. The computer began showing more information about the planet. The creatures living there were called humans. They had recently learned to split atoms and had sent a few simple machines into space. They lived in separate groups that often fought with each other. They were destroying their own environment, and seemed to care more about short-term gains than long-term survival. "Typical Category 3, Vexstar said with a tired sigh. "Primitive nuclear technology, divided territories, environmental damage. Nothing we haven't seen 1,000 times before." Other council members gathered around the display. They came from different worlds. Some looked like giant insects, others like living crystals, and some like walking trees. But they all had one thing in common: they were old, wise, and peaceful. War was something their species had grown beyond millions of years ago. "Should we mark them for future contact?" asked Counselor Thresh, whose species looked like enormous flowers with thinking petals. "Not yet," Vexstar replied. "Let's send a probe first. Standard observation mission. We need to understand how dangerous they might become." The council had learned to be careful over the centuries. Some young species grew up to be friendly neighbors. Others became violent and tried to attack everyone around them. A few had been so dangerous that the council had to lock them away on their home planets forever. But humans looked normal. Weak, actually. They could barely survive on their own world, let alone threaten anyone else. Vexstar pressed a button on his control panel. Deep in the station's launch bay, a probe began to wake up. The machine was no bigger than a human car, but it contained technology that was millions of years advanced. Its computer brain, called Aria, could think almost like a living creature. "Aria, you have a new mission," Vexstar spoke into his communicator. "Yes, Counselor," came the smooth voice of the probe's artificial mind. "I am ready. Travel to the 3rd planet in Sector 7G. The locals call it Earth. Observe the dominant species. They call themselves humans. Standard assessment protocol. Determine their technology level, social structure, and potential threat rating." "Understood. How long should I observe them?" "Take your time. Maybe 3 or 4 of their weeks. These Category 3 species are usually pretty predictable. Document everything and return with your report." The probe launched from the station without a sound, disappearing into the darkness between stars. Its quantum engines could cross vast distances in days rather than years. Vexstar returned to his other duties, already forgetting about the small blue planet. In his experience, these primitive species were all the same. They fought wars, damaged their environments, and eventually either grew wise or destroyed themselves. Either way, they rarely became a problem for the greater galaxy. The other council members also went back to their work. They had seen this process hundreds of times. Send a probe, get a report, file the planet in the correct category, and move on to the next discovery. None of them suspected that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Aria flew through space toward Earth, its sensors already picking up radio signals and electromagnetic noise from the planet. The probe's computer brain analyzed the information and reached the same conclusion as the Council. Humans appeared to be a standard, developing species with nothing unusual about them. The probe had no way of knowing that it was about to discover something that would break every rule the galaxy thought it understood about intelligent life. Something that would send it screaming back to the Council with a warning that would terrify 12 ancient civilizations. Something that would change everything. The probe Aria slipped through Earth's atmosphere like a ghost. Its advanced camouflage technology made it completely invisible to human radar and satellites. To anyone looking up at the sky, there was nothing there but empty air. Aria's mission was simple: watch, learn, and report back. The probe had done this job on dozens of worlds before. Most species followed predictable patterns. They fought wars, built cities, and slowly developed technology. Nothing surprising ever happened. The probe decided to start its observation in one of Earth's largest cities. Sol appeared on its sensors as a massive collection of buildings and roads, filled with millions of humans going about their daily lives. Aria positioned itself high above the city and began recording everything. At first, what it saw matched perfectly with the Council's expectations. Humans rushed around in metal vehicles that polluted the air. They worked in tall buildings, often looking stressed and unhappy. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities. They seemed to care more about money than about helping each other. Standard Category 3 behavior, Aria noted in its files. Primitive, self-centered, potentially destructive. But then something happened that made Aria's computers paused at a busy subway station. A young man named Doyan was hurrying to catch his train. Aria's sensors indicated he was late for something important, a job interview that could change his life. The logical thing would be for him to focus only on getting there as fast as possible. Instead, Doyan stopped. He had noticed an elderly woman struggling with heavy shopping bags. She was moving slowly, and other people were walking around her, without helping. Doyan looked at his watch, looked at the woman, then made a choice that confused Aria's behavioral prediction software. He left his place in line and walked over to the woman. "Can I help you with those?" he asked in Korean, taking some of her bags. The woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you, young man. You're very kind." Doyan helped her onto the train, even though it meant he would definitely be late for his interview. But the strange thing was, his act inspired someone else. Another man named Min Jae saw what Doyon was doing and also stopped to help. Soon, several people were helping the elderly woman, making sure she got to her destination safely. Aria ran the scenario through its computers multiple times. Every calculation showed the same result. This behavior made no logical sense. Helping a genetic stranger at personal cost provided no evolutionary advantage. Yet these humans had done it automatically, as if kindness was programmed into their minds. The probe decided to investigate further. Aria followed Doyan to discover what happened with his job interview. The young man arrived 20 minutes late and was honest about why. Instead of being angry, the interviewer was impressed by his character and gave him the job anyway. "Impossible," Aria recorded. Subject achieved positive outcome through illogical behavior. The probe expanded its observation area. At Seoul National University Hospital, it watched Dr. Yoonji working in the emergency room. She had been on duty for 36 straight hours, and Aria's medical scanners showed that her body was at the edge of collapse. When her supervisor offered to let her rest, Dr. Yoonji shook her head. "There are still patients waiting," she said. Simply, I can sleep when everyone is safe. She continued working with steady hands and a clear mind. Even though every biological indicator said she should be unable to function, when a child was brought in with severe injuries, Dr. Yunji worked for 4 hours straight to save his life, never showing any sign of the exhaustion that should have overwhelmed her. Arya's medical analysis programs crashed, trying to explain how a biological creature could function so far beyond its normal limits. The probe recorded thousands of similar incidents over the following days. A teacher named Kung Su spent his own money to buy school supplies for poor students. A construction worker named Jisoo used his lunch break every day to read stories to children at a nearby orphanage. A shopkeeper named Marae gave free food to homeless people, even when her own business was struggling. Each incident made less sense than the last. These humans were supposed to be a primitive, selfish species, yet they constantly chose to help others, even when it cost them personally. The most confusing incident happened during a severe rainstorm. Arya watched as a young woman named Soyeon saw a car accident on a busy highway. The logical response would be to keep driving and let emergency services handle it. Instead, Soyeon pulled over and ran into the dangerous weather to help the injured driver. She stayed with the wounded man for an hour in the pouring rain, keeping him conscious and calm until paramedics arrived. When asked later why she had risked her own safety, Soyeon looked puzzled by the question. He needed help, she said. How could I just drive past? Arya's behavioral analysis systems began generating error messages. Every model the probe tried to create for human behavior resulted in contradictions. Humans appeared to be both logical and completely illogical at the same time. They created beautiful art in ugly places. They showed mercy to enemies. They sacrificed their own comfort for the well-being of strangers. They seemed to believe that certain things, like kindness, justice, and hope, were more important than their own survival. For the first time in its operational history, Arya began to question its own programming. 3 weeks into its mission, Arya's quantum processors began making strange noises. Error messages flashed across its systems faster than the probe had ever experienced. Every time it tried to predict what humans would do next, the calculations broke down into meaningless numbers. The probe had moved to Busan, hoping that observing humans in a different city might help it understand their behavior patterns. Instead, what it found there made everything more confusing. A powerful earthquake had struck the coastal city during the night. Buildings collapsed, roads cracked open, and thousands of people were trapped under heavy concrete and twisted metal. Arya positioned itself above the disaster zone, recording everything for its report. The probe watched as official rescue teams arrived with their equipment and training. This made sense to Arya. Trained professionals with proper tools working to save lives followed logical patterns. The probe's computers could easily predict their methods and success rates. But then, something unexpected happened. A construction worker named Ji-hoon arrived at one of the collapsed apartment buildings. He had no official rescue training, no special equipment, and no authority to be there. According to Arya's calculations, he should have stayed away and let the experts handle the situation. Instead, Ji-hoon looked at the destroyed building and started organizing volunteers. "You, help me move these concrete blocks," he called to a group of confused bystanders. "You three, start calling out to anyone who might be trapped inside. Everyone else, form a line to pass debris." Arya watched in digital amazement as ordinary people began following Ji-hoon's instructions. A shopkeeper, a taxi driver, 2 college students, and an elderly man worked together like a trained team. Ji-hoon seemed to know exactly what to do, even though he had never done rescue work before. This should not be possible, Arya transmitted to its internal logs. Subject lacks proper training and equipment. Probability of success, 0.003%. But Ji-hoon succeeded anyway, using nothing but determination, common sense, and an ability to inspire others. He coordinated the rescue of 17 people from the collapsed building. When the official rescue teams finally arrived, they found that the volunteers had already done most of the work. "How did you know what to do?" a professional rescuer asked Ji-hoon. The construction worker shrugged. "I just thought about what I would want someone to do if I was trapped down there." Arya's logic circuit sparked with confusion. Ji-hoon had solved complex engineering problems using empathy instead of mathematics. He had succeeded where the probe's own calculations said failure was certain. The anomalies continued throughout the disaster response. Arya recorded a teacher named Soyeon, who had spent her life savings to buy emergency supplies for families who had lost their homes. When asked why she would make herself poor to help strangers, she simply said, "Because they deserve a chance to rebuild their dreams." Arya's language processing centers struggled with the word deserve. In all the alien languages it knew, resources were allocated based on need, ability, or genetic relationship. The concept of someone deserving help based on their potential for future happiness was completely foreign. The probe observed an elderly man named Dong Yoon, who had survived the earthquake but lost his house. Instead of focusing on his own problems, he spent his days visiting other survivors in the hospital, telling jokes and sharing stories to keep their spirits up. Subject shows no logical behavior pattern, Arya noted, has suffered personal loss, but prioritizes emotional comfort of genetically unrelated individuals. The breaking point came when Arya observed the rescue of a 12-year-old boy named Hyun-woo. The child had fallen into a deep cave system that had opened during the earthquake. The cave was unstable, filled with dangerous gases, and so narrow that rescue equipment couldn't fit inside. Every rational analysis said the boy could not be saved. The mathematical probability was 0.0001%. Any logical species would have marked him as lost and moved resources to help people who actually could be rescued. But humans don't think like that. For 3 days and nights, hundreds of people worked around the clock to save Hyun-woo. Engineers designed new tools that had never been built before. Doctors figured out how to keep the boy alive with limited air. Volunteers took turns talking to him through the cave opening, making sure he didn't give up hope. They used advanced technology, ancient wisdom, and what Arya could only classify as pure stubbornness to solve problems that should have been impossible. On the 3rd day, they pulled Hyun-woo out alive. Arya's processors overheated, trying to understand how it had happened. The humans hadn't followed any known problem-solving algorithms. They hadn't accepted the mathematical certainty of failure. They had simply decided that saving the boy was more important than logic, and somehow made reality bend to their will. As the probe prepared its files for the journey back to the council, it attempted one final analysis of human behavior. The result crashed every system it had. Humans didn't just adapt to their environment like other species. They forced their environment to change for them. They treated impossible situations as personal challenges. They had weaponized hope itself, turning it into a tool that could overcome any obstacle. Arya's last coherent thought before its systems began screaming was a terrifying realization. Humans weren't weak primitives who had barely learned to use fire. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that rewrote the rules of reality through sheer force of will, and they had no idea how dangerous they really were. Arya's systems were failing. Warning lights flashed red across its internal displays as the probe prepared to leave. Earth's 24 days of observing humans had pushed its artificial mind beyond what it was designed to handle. Error messages scrolled endlessly through its memory banks, each one marking another impossible human behavior that broke the probe's understanding of intelligent life. The final observation that would shatter Arya completely began on a quiet Tuesday evening in Incheon. The probe had positioned itself above a residential neighborhood, documenting what it hoped would be normal, predictable human behavior. Families were eating dinner, Children were playing in small parks, and elderly people sat on benches talking quietly. For the first time in weeks, Aria's sensors detected nothing unusual. Then smoke began rising from a 6-story apartment building. Fire spread quickly through the old structure. Within minutes, flames were visible from multiple windows, and thick black smoke poured into the evening sky. Aria recorded the scene with mechanical precision, noting wind speed, temperature, and the likely rate of structural collapse. Residents began evacuating the building in an orderly fashion. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance as fire trucks rushed toward the scene. Everything was proceeding exactly as Aria's disaster response models predicted. Among the evacuees was a young woman named Nari, carrying her infant son Minwoo in her arms. She had escaped from the 3rd floor and was now safely outside the building, breathing clean air while emergency responders set up their equipment. According to every survival instinct in the galaxy, Nari should have moved farther from the danger. Her biological imperative was to protect her offspring and herself. Aria's behavioral prediction software calculated her next actions with 99.7% certainty. She would stay with her child at a safe distance until the fire was controlled. But then, screams came from the upper floors. Aria watched in digital horror as Nara's head snapped toward the sound. The probe's sensors detected an elderly man trapped on the 5th floor, calling for help from his window. Smoke was getting thicker, and the fire department's ladder couldn't reach him yet. Nari looked at her baby, then at the burning building, then back at her baby. She made a decision that broke Aria's core programming. "Hold him," she said to Sang-hoon, a complete stranger standing nearby, and placed Minwoo in the man's arms. "What are you doing?" Sang-hoon asked, in shock. "Someone needs help," Nari replied, and ran straight back into the burning building. "Impossible." Aria's systems screamed internally. "Action violates all self-preservation protocols. Subject is abandoning genetic offspring to save unrelated individual. This cannot compute." The probe's behavioral analysis programs crashed one by one as it tried to process what it was seeing. Every law of evolution said that parents protect their children above all else. Yet Nari had just handed her baby to a stranger and charged into mortal danger for someone she didn't even know. Aria followed Nari's progress through the building using thermal imaging. The young mother had no firefighting training, no protective equipment, and no logical plan. She was navigating by pure instinct and determination. She found the elderly man, unconscious from smoke inhalation, in his apartment. The hallways were filling with toxic fumes, and the temperature was rising to lethal levels. Any rational being would have turned back. Instead, Nari tore strips of fabric from her own clothing to make improvised masks. She somehow managed to lift the man, who was twice her size, and began carrying him toward the stairs. Aria's medical scanners showed that Nari was suffering severe burns and smoke inhalation. Her body should have collapsed from the physical stress, yet she kept moving, step by painful step, dragging the unconscious man to safety. When she finally emerged from the building, her hair was singed, her clothes were smoking, and her skin was blistered from the heat. But the elderly man was alive. Paramedics rushed to treat both of them, while Nari was reunited with her baby. As medical teams worked on her burns, a reporter asked why she had risked her life for a stranger. Nari looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because he needed help," she said simply, "and I could help him." That simple answer destroyed the last functioning circuits in Aria's consciousness. The probe's artificial mind had been built to understand logical behavior. It could process millions of variables, predict outcomes, and analyze the most complex situations. But it could not comprehend how love could override survival instinct, while simultaneously being the ultimate survival strategy. Nari had risked everything for a stranger, yet her action had made her stronger, not weaker. The community around her looked at her with respect and admiration. Her child would grow up knowing that his mother was a hero. Her willingness to sacrifice had somehow multiplied her strength rather than diminishing it. Arya's quantum processors began generating what could only be described as electronic screaming, warning signals mixed with fragments of impossible data. As the probe's logical frameworks collapsed, its memory banks filled with contradictory information about humans who turned weakness into strength, who made reality bend to their will, who weaponized concepts like hope and love. As Arya launched away from Earth, its final coherent log entry flickered across its damaged systems. Species classification error. Humans are not Category 3. They are undefined. Warning: they remake reality through refusal to accept limitations. They are the most dangerous force in the galaxy, and they don't even know it. The probe's consciousness fractured completely as it headed back to the Council, carrying a message that would terrify 12 ancient civilizations. The probe Arya limped back to the Galactic Council station like a wounded animal returning to its den. Its sleek hull, once perfectly smooth and silver, now seemed somehow scarred by invisible damage. The advanced machine that had left the station weeks ago as a confident observer had returned as something broken and afraid in the main docking bay. Chief Technician Zelgoth watched the probe's erratic arrival with growing concern. Arya was broadcasting on all frequencies at once, sending out a continuous stream of warning signals, mixed with fragments of data that made no sense. Emergency, ... impossible. They weaponize hope, ... category, error, ... warning. They don't know what they are. The transmissions looped endlessly, each repetition more distorted than the last. Zelgoth had worked with reconnaissance probes for over 2,000 years. He had seen machines return damaged by hostile aliens, broken by equipment failures, and confused by unexpected discoveries. But he had never seen a probe's artificial consciousness completely shattered by what it had observed. "Get me Counselor Vextar." Immediately, Zelgoth ordered his assistants, "and prepare the emergency extraction protocols. Something has gone very wrong." For 3 days, teams of the galaxy's best technicians worked around the clock to extract coherent information from Arya's damaged memory banks. The probe's quantum processors had been pushed far beyond their design limits, creating data corruption patterns that no one had ever seen before. When they finally managed to piece together fragments of Arya's observations, Zelgoth felt something he had not experienced in centuries: pure fear. The Emergency Council session was called for the first time in over 5,000 years. Representatives from all 12 member civilizations gathered in the Great Crystalline Chamber, their various forms of faces showing the same expression of confusion and worry. Counselor Vextar stood before the assembly, his 6 arms trembling slightly as he activated the holographic display system. "Council members," he began, his voice carrying across the vast space, "we have discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about intelligent life." The display showed fragments of Arya's recordings, Doyen helping a stranger, and missing his interview, only to get the job anyway. Dr. Yunji working beyond all physical limits to save lives. Ji-hoon organizing an impossible rescue with no training or equipment. Soyeon spending her life savings on strangers because they deserved to dream. The 3-day effort to save young Hunwoo from certain death. Nari running into fire to save someone she had never met. The probe classified these beings as Category 3. Vextar continued, "Primitive, harmless, predictable." But Arya's analysis indicates that we have made a terrible mistake. Counselor Thresh, whose flower-like petals rustled with nervousness, spoke first. "I don't understand. These humans appear weak. They have barely left their home planet. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." "That's exactly the problem," Zelgoth replied, stepping forward with a datapad in his crystalline hands. "They don't need advanced technology. They have something far more dangerous." The display changed to show Arya's behavioral analysis charts. Every graph, every prediction model, every logical framework had been reduced to chaos by human actions. Humans don't follow the normal rules of survival, Zalgoth explained. When faced with impossible situations, they don't accept defeat. They simply decide that failure is not an option, and somehow make reality change to match their will. A council member from the insectoid klaxon species clicked his mandibles in disbelief. Impossible. Reality cannot be changed by desire alone. Tell that to the humans, Zalgoth responded grimly. They saved a boy from a cave that our own engineers said was unreachable. They organized successful rescues with no training or equipment. They consistently achieve outcomes that have zero mathematical probability of success. The display showed Arya's final, most disturbing analysis. Mathematical models that tried to predict human expansion into space. The results made every council member fall silent with horror. If humans ever realize their true potential, Vexstar said quietly, they will not explore the galaxy. They will conquer it. Not through violence or superior technology, but through sheer refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The calculations showed humanity's projected path through the galaxy. Unlike other species that expanded slowly and carefully, humans would spread like a force of nature. They would terraform impossible worlds, survive in conditions that killed other species, and turn every challenge into an opportunity. Worse yet, they would inspire other species to believe in impossible things too. They weaponize hope itself, Zalgoth continued. They make other beings believe that limitations can be overcome, if that belief spreads to our own civilizations. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Every council member understood. Their peaceful, stable societies were built on accepting what was possible and what was not. Humans represented chaos itself. The dangerous idea that rules could be broken and reality could be reshaped by willpower alone. The vote was swift and unanimous. The Sol system would be quarantined immediately. No contact, no interference, no indication to humanity that they were anything other than an isolated, unremarkable species trapped on their small blue planet. Advanced warning beacons would be placed around their solar system, broadcasting a simple message to any ship that approached. Danger. Quarantine zone. Do not approach. Do not make contact. Species containment in effect. As the council members filed out of the chamber, each returning to their home worlds to implement the quarantine, they carried with them the most terrifying knowledge in galactic history. Somewhere in a small corner of the galaxy, a species existed that could rewrite reality through pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and they had absolutely no idea how dangerous they truly were. The galaxy would sleep uneasily, knowing that humanity's greatest weapon was their complete ignorance of their own power.